Hello, I'm Laura Knights, CEO of Knights Consulting, creator of BlackWomanLeading.com, and the host of Black Woman Leading, the podcast. This podcast amplifies the needs and experiences of Black women leaders in the workplace with a holistic focus on three core areas: leadership development, mental wellness, and relationship management. Our ultimate aim is to help Black women learn, heal, and grow in their leadership capacity. Before we jump into this next podcast episode, I wanted to invite you to the 2025 Black Woman Leading Live Conference and Retreat, taking place May 27th through the 30th, 2025 in Virginia Beach. Now, if you haven't heard, Black Woman Leading Live is the premier leadership development conference to help Black women professionals learn, heal, and grow in their leadership capacity. Imagine a community of Black women leaders from across the country supporting you as you clarify your career growth strategy, work on refining your leadership skills, and make a plan to tend to your mental health and self-care. Yes, we do all of that at this transformational, professional, and personal development experience designed by Black women for Black women. Now, activities will include workshops, panels, wellness breaks, laser coaching, networking, action planning, and some fun community events. And at the 2025 event, in addition to our overall focus on your career development and holistic wellness, we'll dive a little bit deeper into the critical leadership competency of strategic communication. Every effective leader has gained some mastery of strategic communication, and we want to help you to do the same. So yes, we're going to get into all of this, and sis, you need to be there. Get all the details and save your seat at www.bwlretreat.com. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Black Woman Leading, the podcast. Today we're talking about strengthening mindful self-talk. And so I thought it was so timely, and I have to give a shout out to our BWL alums. In our alumni support program, each quarter we have a workshop that is curated. The topics are curated by the participants. And so this topic actually came from our alumni participants, an area that they wanted to improve in, an area that they wanted to get some more resources in. So I mention it all the time on the podcast. If you listen, we attract high achievers here at Black Woman Leading. And one of the common things that I experience with high achievers is that we are our own worst critics sometimes, right? Not only in our evaluation of ourselves, what we could do better, but in our inner dialogue, the things we're saying to ourselves as we're going in and out, day in and day out as a leader, doing stuff, shifting stuff, leading stuff. We are having dialogue internally that is sometimes a bit critical. And so we want to dive into this. And one, does it matter? Absolutely it matters. And it has an impact not only on our confidence, but on our wellness. And there's some insights I want to share with you on that. Okay. And so when we are talking about mindful self-talk, we're talking about this kind of deliberate awareness of how we are having conversations about what we're doing, about ourselves, and it's happening all the time, whether subconscious or very aware of what we're saying. It's happening. And so we add this concept of mindfulness to this because mindfulness is around being in this present moment with non-judgment, having an awareness of the experience that we're having, the thoughts that we're having. When we apply this mindfulness framework to our positive self-talk, then mindful self-talk can be understood as the deliberate and conscious monitoring of our inner dialogue. So I'm here to ask you, how are you talking to yourself, sis? Are you speaking words of affirmation and encouragement? And even if you need to correct yourself, right? How are you speaking to yourself? Are you talking slick to yourself? Okay. Are you beating yourself down internally? Are you being really critical in a way that's not helpful and that may be more harmful. I want you to do a little bit of assessment of that. And if you're not aware, here's a point for you to start paying attention to what's coming up for you. So no matter what your spiritual practice is, there is some insight into the power of our spoken word. So I'm a Christian, and my word talks about there is the power of life and death in the tongue. And those who love it, those who eat the fruit of it is how it's said poetically. But basically what that means is that you either are going to experience the reward from those words you're saying, or you're going to experience the consequence from those words you're saying. That's not only what you speak out to other people, but it's also what you speak to yourself. So I want to give you some insights today to one, just give you a moment to pause and think about, what is my inner dialogue? How am I talking to myself? Where does that come from? Where does that messaging come from, whether positive or negative? And if I want to flip the script on that, what are some tactical things I can do to begin to reframe the language that I'm speaking in my inner dialogue? So we're doing a little bit of heart work today and a little bit of head work today. Y'all know the drill. Okay, let's jump into it. So thinking about what is happening, what your inner dialogue is, what you're saying to yourself day in and day out. If it's positive messages of affirmation, of encouragement, if it's more critical messages or negative thoughts. For example, you going for the promotion. Oh, I'm probably never going to get that job. That's what's going on inside. Or you just got promoted. I don't even know if I'm equipped to manage this new team. Can I manage the size of this team? That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about when I talk about our inner dialogue, right? Where do the thoughts come from? Whether positive or negative, they didn't just appear. They are actually deeply ingrained beliefs and attitudes and rules that have been cultivated over your lifetime, from your family of origin, from the things you learned about yourself as a child, all the way up to the life experiences you're having right now as an adult. So the messages that we say to ourselves and about ourselves are formed from these experiences and also from external influences. Now we know as Black women who our work is focused towards, there is enough negative messaging coming at us about us, right? So it's not only what is coming from within, but also what are the external inputs that you're getting as well, right? And so we don't need no help telling negative messages to self. There's enough of that in external inputs. So we need to be mindful of where that's coming from. So all jokes aside though, if this is your challenge, then trying to shift to being more mindful and positive about the self-talk you're applying to yourself can really help you. Now, if you're more of a science girly, I talked a little bit about the spiritual context and all of that. If you're more of a science girly, research actually supports this. Now, it's still burgeoning and it's not a direct causation. It's a correlation that the research is showing, but it's showing that there's research that supports that positive self-talk can actually improve your cognitive performance. So whether we're taking it from a spiritual context or you want to pull on the correlation science, what we say to ourselves matter, and what you focus on and how you talk to yourself are the things that will grow, not only in your thought life, but in your material life. So let me give you a couple of mindfulness elements, and then we'll get into the tactical kind of reframing, flipping the script. So mindfulness, again, is the awareness that arises from paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And so it's about noticing what's coming, right? What are the thoughts that I'm having, and not really judging that, not really saying, oh, I shouldn't be thinking that. Just noticing first. Awareness is first. What is happening? What are we saying to ourselves? Okay. If this is a challenge for you to kind of get in touch with your thought life, I want you to think of a recent experience you may have had where you feel like maybe you didn't meet the full standard, or maybe you have dropped the ball, or maybe you didn't perform at the level that you wanted to perform at. Get that recent experience in your head. Maybe it's something at the job, in your role, a conversation you had, something at home, whatever the case. Get that in your head. And I want you to try to go back to that moment and think about what you were saying or thinking about that experience. Okay? What were you saying or thinking about that experience? Were you beating yourself up? Were you reframing it? Okay, I'll try again next time. Or were you saying, you didn't do it again. You did it wrong again. Like, what was coming up for you? What we're doing now in a bit of a mindfulness reflection is just noticing what it was. We're not critiquing it. We're not really judging it. That's what we mean by mindfulness, getting really centered in the present moment, just to notice what is happening. No judgment. We're just observers, kind of watching the stuff go by. Okay? So that is one of the things that's going to be very important if you want to shift to a more mindful and a positive self-talk. One, you got to be aware about what you're saying. One, you got to be aware about what these thoughts are. And if this kind of awareness or being conscious of what's happening internally when you're having moments like this is difficult for you, some things you could do is to journal when you're in these moments so you can go back and actually look at the reflections. You can also do, if it's your thing, it's not everybody's thing, but if it's your thing, you could do some meditation practices. There's a lot of mindfulness meditations. You can get them on these apps like the Calm app and things of the sort. You can even go to YouTube and Google mindfulness meditations. And what it's about is just helping you get still enough to be aware of what's happening. Okay. Biggest thing about the mindfulness piece is that it's non-judgmental and it's about having some self-compassion, just building awareness. Now let's tap into this non-judgment and self-compassion a little bit. And I'm giving you the precursors to be able to flip the script. Okay. When we think about the non-judgmental piece of it, this is not saying that you don't acknowledge there's something you could have done better or that there was a mistake you made. It's not about that. Because when I start talking about the self-compassion and the non-judgmentalness, sometimes I get like the side eye, like, girl, but it was not right. But it was a mistake. I'm not saying we glossing over that. But I am saying that acknowledging that it's a mistake, acknowledging that I could have improved, acknowledging that I could have done something different is not necessarily the same as having an internal beatdown of self. Okay. So mindfulness is just what's happening. How do I normally talk to myself? Getting that together. But then once we get some awareness, we want to be able to be mindful around self-compassion and non-judgment. The mindfulness and the self-compassion are the two pieces you're going to need to be able to build your positive self-talk. So self-compassion is a precursor to strengthening mindful self-talk. It's about understanding that everybody, including you, my love, makes mistakes and that it is part of the human experience. So 3 tenets of self-compassion you can think about. And if this is interesting to you, premier thought leader in this space, Dr. Kristen Neff, has some really practical things. You could check out her website, self-compassion.org, all manner of exercises and meditation things and even just journal prompts. Okay, so here are the 3 tenets of self-compassion. So one is self-kindness. Do we have the capacity to apply kindness to self? So think about your dear friend or your child who may be having a hard time and they come to you and they're sharing about that hard day. What are the things you would say to that person that you love about, they had a hard day? That's what we mean by self-kindness. Can you say those things to yourself? That's tenet 1 of self-compassion. Tenet 2 of self-compassion is the mindfulness aspects we were just talking about. So the awareness to kind of be in the present moment. And then tenet 3 of self-compassion is acknowledging the human experience, acknowledging that it's part of the human experience that we're going to make mistakes, that you are not alone. There's nothing wrong wrong with you, if you've made some mistakes, if you haven't met the mark. That is part of our common humanity. So those three things: self-kindness, can we be kind to ourselves? Mindfulness, can we be present in the moment about the experience that we're having without judgment? And then 3, can we acknowledge our common humanity? Okay, these are 3 pieces. Now, again, sometimes when I start talking about self-compassion, folks want to give me the side eye and think that I'm just saying you're supposed to be soft and not acknowledge when you make mistakes and all that kind of stuff. What I love about Dr. Kristen Neff's work, and again, she's one of the kind of foremost thought leaders in the self-compassion space, is that she talks about there are 2 parts of self-compassion. There is tender self-compassion and there is fierce self-compassion, right? They are not mutually exclusive. Tender self-compassion is what people normally think of when you hear self-compassion. So it is almost like you giving yourself a hug. It is the loving, baby, it's going to be okay. You made a mistake. You can try again. It's that piece that when we need to be kind to ourselves so that we can heal from setbacks, so we can move forward from suffering, that kind of thing. So think of tender self-compassion as giving yourself a hug, right? But then there's also fierce self-compassion. And fierce self-compassion is about taking action. So that's like, you can think about that as the mama bear. Somebody want to hurt somebody you love and you like, oh, you better get back. That is fierce self-compassion. And you can have that towards self too. So that's your setting boundaries with self and others. That's being able to say no to take care of yourself. That is also taking action. So you think about, I feel like I should be further ahead right now. And when you say, all right, I got to get this together, as my 15-year-old daughter says, you got to lock in, right? When you give yourself that pep talk, like, girl, all right, we got to do this. That's self-compassion too. We are doing it in a motivating way, though, to drive ourselves to action. So all of this is not just, unicorns and rainbows and you just be soft with yourself and don't hold yourself accountable. No, self-compassion can have both sides, tenderness, but also fierceness. Like, girl, okay, we got to get this together. So, all right, I'm giving you the building blocks here: the mindfulness, the self-compassion. Now, let's say we've got some awareness that we got some critical self-talk that's not really helpful. It's more negative. It's more kind of hurtful. It's more scolding, right? Now that we've kind of thought about this mindfulness, we've thought about this self-compassion, then we want to flip the script so that we can begin to say things to ourselves that's actually going to help us, that's actually going to help us to bounce back, to recover, to move forward. So a couple of steps in flipping the script, being able to strengthen your mindful self-talk. One, we have to be aware of the negative thoughts that we may be working from. Remember, the self-talk doesn't come out the blue. It comes from ingrained experiences, things from childhood. It comes from real life experience. It comes from external inputs. So we have to be able to identify negative thoughts and reframe that. That's one thing. I'm going to give you more insight on that in just a second. Okay, so I'm giving you some building blocks that's helping us to move forward: the mindfulness, the self-compassion. So I'm going to give you a couple of steps to help you rewire and strengthen your ability to do more mindful self-talk. So 1, we have to become aware of our negative thoughts and be able to challenge them. I'm going to come back to that. 2, we have to revisit some of our rules. I'm going to come back to that. 3, then once we have some awareness about that, then we need to flip the script and replace that negative critical self-talk with the more positive self-compassion, mindful self-talk. Okay. And then the last 2 I'm just going to mention. One practice that we know that really supports our ability to increase our mindful self-talk is gratitude. So when we have opportunities, intentional opportunities to think about what we're grateful for, to recognize what we have done versus everything that we haven't done, everything that we failed at, but to really recognize what we have done, how we have contributed, the value that we've given. That gratitude gives us a whole different perspective that then gives us different language. Okay. And then the last thing before I go back and give you a little bit more insight on those first three that I mentioned. The fifth thing in flipping the script is that everything I'm talking about today is around your own self-care, the things that you are going to do for yourself. But sometimes, depending on how deeply ingrained those negative thoughts or that past life experience or them things that mama said to you that was jacked up when you were little is still holding you, you might need to get some help from a professional to help you flip the script on this too. Your therapist, your counselor, you might need some reinforcements. And I want to destigmatize that for you if you're finding that, okay, these practices are good, Laura, but this stuff is kind of deep for me. It's kind of heavy. There's some healing that needs to happen. I want to encourage you to reach out and get some support for that. If you need some reinforcements, it's all good. Okay. Now let's go back to 1, 2, 3. Recognizing the negative thoughts, being able to reframe those so that you can replace the language. Let me give you a little bit more information about that. So let's talk about this identifying and challenging negative thoughts, right? Back to the awareness. So that mindfulness helps you to gain awareness. So there's a couple of types of negative thoughts. There's a ton of them, but there are a couple of types that I notice in my work with Black women. So one is personalizing. So in your inner monologue, you're blaming everything on yourself. Everything is your fault in the interaction, right? That's what we call personalizing. Another type of negative thought is magnifying, is that all of these things happen, but you're zooming in on the negative aspects only without acknowledging any of the positive. That's what we call magnifying. Another type of negative thought is catastrophizing. So that's always expecting the worst. I mean, you have went from, oh, what if I don't get the job? All the way down to, if I don't get the job, then I can't pay the bills, then we lose the house, then the family homeless, and we living in a cardboard box. We done went down that dark hole in 2 seconds, right? That's catastrophizing. Rehashing is another one. Rehashing is when we kind of obsessively go over and over and over the details and what could have went different and what we should have said different, to the point that it is no longer helpful, it's harmful. Another common one is this rehearsing. So you have an opportunity that's coming up. You're thinking about, starting that business, writing the book, applying for the new job. And before you will take action, fear, self-compassion. Remember, we talked about that. You going over and over and over and over in your head. Well, what if I did this? And then what if I said this? And then to the point that you don't take any action. Okay. So these are all different types of common negative thought patterns that I see with folks that I coach and people that I work with. So we want to assess, is any of this going on with us? Do you see kind of these patterns of negative thoughts? First, you want to identify them. But what you have to do before you can flip the script is you have to address that negative thought with reality. So for example, let's say you have the personalizing negative thought, where everything, no matter what happened, it's all your fault. Even if other people are engaged, even if other people had a responsibility, you're holding all the weight of that. As you think about those thoughts you're saying to yourself about that, you want to be able to notice it first, interrupt that thought, and then confront it with reality. And so what might that look like? Let's say I've had a project at work and it didn't go as well, or a meeting or something like that. The meeting didn't go according to the plan. And there was some negative feedback or something from a customer or from a stakeholder as a result of that. Okay, let's say all of that. Maybe there is a piece that you own of what didn't go well. But when you address that with reality, can you think of any other elements that may have happened? any other even circumstances that may have impacted how you showed up. Not absolving yourself of the responsibility, but giving a realistic viewpoint of what really happened in that situation. So whenever you find those negative thoughts taking you down a path, think about the catastrophizing. I'm not going to get the job. If I don't get the job, we're going to lose the house. If we lose the house, we're going to be homeless, and all these kind of dark hole thoughts that happen. Really put into reality to that, right? Maybe you need to find a job, but maybe if you don't get this one, you immediately are not going to be homeless. Okay. And you may have to address the anxiety or the fear that's coming up with the reality of the situation. We got to interrupt the thoughts before we can reframe them, before we can say something else about it. So first you want to get a sense of going back to that mindfulness and being aware of what's happening in the present moment. What are the negative thoughts that I'm allowing to, or that subconsciously are circling in my head? And if I interrupt them and address those with reality, can I interrupt that path for a moment to give myself an opportunity to infuse some different language in there? Okay. So that's the first thing you're going to do. Okay. So we've interrupted the negative thoughts, addressed them with reality. Okay. The second thing that I talked about is revisiting your rules. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. I'm just going to give you a high level because I did a whole podcast on this. Season 3, episode 16 is linked in the show notes on this revisiting your rules. But your rules are kind of like the unspoken code guides that govern how you live your life. Our rules give us order. They provide safety, ways of knowing. They help us navigate the world. And they help us feel in control of our lives. So although many of our rules may be helpful in how we engage, for example, a rule in my family is your word is your bond, right? We teach that to our children. We live by that. That's something that really helps us, right? But sometimes some of our rules are harmful or outdated for the current season of life. So it may have been something that was borrowed from our parents, from our family of origin, and that was a rule that worked for their life, but maybe it doesn't work for our life. And so if we have these rules that we're living by, they're informing our internal monologue, right? Sometimes you got to stop and revisit those rules because you're growing, you're changing, your seasons of life are changing, and you might need new rules for this season. Okay. So I'm not going to go into that in depth. We got a whole podcast episode on that. Season 3, episode 16, linked in the show notes. Okay. Now, we've kind of done this assessment work. Now it's time to flip the script. And what we're doing is, as we assess, maybe there was some negative thoughts, some negative scripts, some negative rules that is not really helping us. We begin to interrogate them, so to speak, and confront them with the reality of this season of our life. And then what we want to do is then shift, replace that messaging with something more positive, something more mindful. For example, I have some goals that I wanted to reach. I'll speak personally. I had some goals that I wanted to reach this quarter. Some things I wanted to get done. And I just couldn't get them done. I had too many things going on. I was supporting a family member with some things, and, I just couldn't get them done. And so the internal monologue, the critical internal monologue was initially like, oh, Laura, you dropped the ball on this. You should have got this done. Now this is going to set our timeline back. And although the timeline has to be shifted, the, more critical talk was infusing shame. It was infusing guilt. All things that are not helpful to really move forward, right? That are not helpful to be able to kind of reset and move forward with clarity and positive intention. And after taking some of my own advice on this, I had to pause and confront that with reality. What was the reality? Was the reality that I was sitting around just twiddling my thumbs, chilling and being lazy and procrastinating? No, that wasn't the reality. The reality was that it was probably impossible to get the number of things that I had on my list done in the time I have. The reality was that 2 weeks of time that would have been spent towards that particular action item was reframed to help a loved one do something that they really needed to do in their lives that was important for me to be there for them. So then when I reframe with that mindset, the language isn't, Laura, you dropped the ball. The language is, Laura, this was the plan. Because we repurposed our time to support a loved one, we're going to have to adjust this timeline to achieve this. It may take a little bit longer, but because that was important, this is important too. And because we only have this 24 hours in a day, we're going to adjust it. You're going to reach out for some resources. You may have to delegate some things, and then we're going to move the timeline. That is a totally different perspective that empowers me now to recalibrate and get back on track instead of kind of wallowing in the failure. Does that make sense? So I hope you all, with just these insights, you have some tips to think about where might I be getting held up in my own negative self-talk that could be sabotaging me from moving forward. How might I address that? How might I interrupt those thought patterns? How might I address it with the reality of the situation and choose something that is rooted in self-compassion, not all butterflies and rainbows. Remember, we got tender and we got fierce that spurs us to action. Rooted in that self-compassion that will support me to show up differently, that will support me to move forward despite any setbacks that I've had. And you all know that season 6 that we're in right now, our theme is community care is critical. And in our core questions, we've been focused in how we have asked for help from our community and how we have asked for help and how we've been a source of help to our community. So what's the connection here to the season theme? Well, the connection here is the same way that you are able to give what we call your care superpowers. That's been one of our core questions we've been asking all of our guests. What is your care superpower that you give to your community that gives them a safe space to land? The same thing that you do for your girlfriends, your kids, your siblings, your colleagues, your loved ones as a leader. How might you give that to yourself, right? There's an excellent exercise from that selfcompassion.org website called the How Would I Talk to a Friend exercise. And I want to give you the prompts and maybe you can jot down a couple of things to try this for yourself, right? Think about a loved one. I think about like my 15-year-old daughter. You could think about a friend. You could think about maybe one of your team members at work that you're really trying to develop and grow professionally. And imagine that they came to you and said, oh, I really messed up. I really failed at something. I dropped the ball and I'm trying to get it back together. And they're just really feeling low about it. What would you say to them? What would you say to them to empower them, to encourage them, to help them get back on track? Think about it. Write it down if you can. What would you say to that person? I think about my 15-year-old daughter. What would I say to my baby if she's coming to me and really discouraged about feeling like she's not hitting the mark? How would I encourage her, affirm her, empower her to move forward? When you think of that language that you would give to that person you care about, that person that you love, I want you to imagine now you giving that to yourself when you're in that same situation. What can you say to yourself that you would say to your girl who calling you? What can you say to yourself that you might say to your 15-year-old baby if you got one like me? What would you say to yourself that you could say to your mentee if they came for you needing support? That's what we're talking about, y'all. We're talking about community care applied to self. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about mindful self-talk. Okay, so I hope this has given you a couple of things to think about, and how you can nurture yourself, how you can support yourself, how you can care for yourself in the space of your inner dialogue. Okay, if this was helpful for you, we hope that you share this with a friend. We are available on all streaming platforms. You can find us everywhere. Comment, you all, rate the episode. Help us to amplify this work that we're doing here at Black Woman Leading. If you want to get in touch with us on socials, we're at Black Woman, woman is singular, at Black Woman Leading on all social platforms. You want to connect with me personally, I'm at Laura E. Knights on all social platforms. You can check out our website at blackwomanleading.com to learn about our programs and our events where we're supporting Black women as they learn, heal, and grow in their leadership capacity. And if you want to know about any of our corporate work we do with leaders inside of organizations, you can check out our corporate site, knightsconsultinggroup.com, to learn how to work with us. We would love to connect with you in any of these ways. And until next time, be well.